Hey guys, I'm Joe. Thanks for tuning into my channel. I'm here with a replay of a Merfolk match I played yesterday against Kiki Chord. This is the first video on my channel of me playing against Kiki Chord. It's a relatively new deck to Modern, made extremely popular recently through Jeff Hoogland's success with it on the SCG Tour circuit. It's sort of a toolbox deck that harkens back to the Birthing Pod decks prior to the ban of Birthing Pod. It's got Chord of Calling that it plays in conjunction with a lot of creatures and lands to search the deck for any piece that it might need. If it needs to remove a creature, it can search for something like a Fiend Hunter. If it needs to get something back from the graveyard, it can get an Eternal Witness. If it needs to blink a creature, it can get a Restoration Angel, or in order to get Kiki to combo off with Restoration Angel. We can see that the opponent has a very strong hand. He's going to have a turn 1 Birds of Paradise, ramping turn 2 into a Courser of Kruphix. He has one part of the Kiki Restoration Angel combo in his hand, and a Restoration Angel could potentially blink Eternal Witness to get value out of his graveyard that way. So pretty powerful stuff on the opponent's side of the table. On my side of things, it's a little slow as far as Merfolk opening hands go, but there are a lot of creature decks in Modern, and Harbinger is a great way to interact with those creatures. Mirror Regery works especially well with Harbinger, allowing us to actually tap down creatures when we cast Harbinger. So even if a creature is untapped, we can tap it and then bounce it with Harbinger. So this is not the best opening hand ever. We prefer to have something like an Aether Vial, maybe a Silvergill Adept, but I cannot throw away 3 lands and 4 creatures, regardless of what the 4 creatures are. So I'm going to keep, and I believe the opponent kept as well. So the opponent opens with a Stomping Ground going down to 18 life and a Birds of Paradise. As I said earlier, I draw a 4th land, which is a Seagate Wreckage, play an island, and okay, so sometimes I tap the island as if I might be trying to resolve a Serum Visions, but then think better of it as if I might have a Spell Snare in my hand, just to throw the opponent off a little bit. I don't have anything to do on my first turn, so I just try to mess with him a little bit. The opponent untaps, draws a Temple Garden, which was really great because he's a little short on lands. He sacrifices a Wooded Foothills, getting a Forest, and resolves Courser of Kruphix for the turn. He reveals a Firelit Thicket from the top of his deck. With Courser of Kruphix, he'll be able to start gaining life off of each of his land drops. Fetch lands can gain 2 life because you gain a life when you play the fetch land, and you gain a life when you bring a land from your library when you use the fetch land. So Courser of Kruphix, this might be the only deck that Courser of Kruphix is still seeing play in. For a while it was getting play in Abzan and Jund. It's a really strong card, but I think people have been moving away from it in general. So I'm going to go ahead to my second turn. I untap and draw a Silvergill Adept. This turn with tapped Birds of Paradise, the play is to put a Harbinger onto the battlefield and get the Bird of Paradise off the table, taking our opponent off of his ramp while getting 2 Devotion onto the battlefield. Okay, so the opponent drew that Firelit Thicket that was on top of the deck. He plays the Thicket and uses all 3 mana to play Eternal Witness, getting back the Wooded Foothills that was in the graveyard from the previous turn. Okay, so we can see that there's a Birds of Paradise on the top of the opponent's deck for next turn, and we go ahead and untap, draw a Wanderwine Hub, and we play the Wanderwine Hub since we're going to play a Merfolk this turn anyway, so we're going to be revealing it at some point anyway. So why not play the Wanderwine Hub and have it come into onto the battlefield untapped? So play the Mirror Regery, the Harbinger becomes a 3/3, and I can't attack through the Courser of Kruphix yet, so I pass the turn. The opponent untaps, draws his Birds of Paradise, now revealing a Restoration Angel on top of the deck. It's always a little bit scary to see Restoration Angel in these Kiki Chord decks because it's such a versatile card. It can blink an Eternal Witness, as I mentioned earlier, to get something back from the graveyard. Usually a really powerful spell like Chord of Calling or Collected Company. But in this case, there's nothing in the graveyard yet, so I'm not totally afraid, and the opponent doesn't have mana at this point to play Kiki. So we're going to go ahead and see what his plan for the turn actually ended up being. So with the Courser of Kruphix on the table, he gains 1 life with the Wooded Foothills and just passes the turn. Now 4 mana is a clear representation that he's planning on something like a Restoration Angel or a Chord of Calling during my turn. So I go ahead and untap. I draw an Ether Vial, which is obviously very late to the game. So we do have access to Mara Regery's tap and untap effects this turn, and with a Harbinger of the Tides, that's going to seem like a good option. So let's see this turn. I played the second Regery. I'm going to untap this land, and having 2 Regeries on the table now makes 2 drops free because they can untap 2 lands each. So the next play I make is going to be Silvergill Adept, revealing Harbinger of the Tides. So I'm going to target 2 of my islands with the 2 Mara Regery triggers. I reveal Harbinger of the Tides for Silvergill's additional cost. The Silvergill will resolve and draw me a card. It draws another Harbinger of the Tides, which I am not going to complain about, with 2 Mara Regeries on the table. So at this point, I think a little bit about whether I want to simply pay 2 mana to commit a Harbinger of the Tides to the table without tapping any of his guys and bouncing them, simply to have extra power and toughness on the table. I think better of it in the end, only casting a single Harbinger of the Tides right now, tapping down one of his creatures to bounce them, since keeping an extra Harbinger of the Tide in my hand next turn will allow me to use double Regery triggers to tap down any blockers that might attempt to prevent me from attacking for a lot of damage. So here, after thinking about it, I do decide to simply cast 1 Harbinger of the Tides. I'm going to untap 1 island and tap his Courser of Kruphix, bouncing the Courser of Kruphix with my Harbinger of the Tides. In response, the opponent chooses to crack his fetch and gain 1 more life off of Courser of Kruphix effect or ability before Courser of Kruphix is bounced from the table. Now the opponent makes a slight misstep here. He says he wanted to get white mana. I tell him he could have, he can just undo the mountain, but I guess he decides to stick with it. Reveals a Quasali Pride Mage at the top of the deck, and the Courser of Kruphix is going to get bounced. With only an Eternal Witness on the table, I feel safe attacking with my guys. He doesn't have access to mana for Restoration Angel now, so I don't have to fear for Mara Regery. It's a big misstep by the opponent there. He goes from 19 down to 12. He draws the Quasali Pride Mage, replays the Courser of Kruphix, reveals the Chord of Calling from the top of his deck, and plays a Temple Garden, takes 2 life, gains 1 life from Courser of Kruphix, feeds mana from Temple Garden into the Firelit Thicket to make 2 green mana, and plays out 2 Birds of Paradise from his hand. So this is where the strategy of keeping a Merfolk in hand for Regery's triggers to tap down blockers next turn is going to come to fruition. I continue drawing lands. I play the Harbinger of Tides, tap the Courser, and the opponent chooses to scoop there. Now we could see that game was an instance of where I drew a Seagate Wreckage and it wasn't detrimental. It didn't draw me cards, but it also was just one among many lands that I drew, and I actually never committed it to the battlefield that game. So sometimes Seagate Wreckage just ends up being another land. It's worth noting, since that's sort of a unique card in my deck. Alright, so that was game 1. It was a strong Merfolk performance. Let's see how game 2 goes. Alright, so we can see the opening hands here. I've got 3 lands with a 1-drop, a 2-drop, and a Harbinger, who we saw really overperformed in the last game, and a Dispel to take care of things like Chord of Calling. We can look at the opponent's hand. He has access to green and white mana, and a fetch land to get him on red mana, a Voice of Resurgence, Eternal Witness to get things back from his graveyard, Courser of Kruphix to gain life, and a Birds of Paradise to ramp him into one of these 3-drop spells on turn 2. The opponent's hand looks fantastic. Our hand is a little bit light on blue mana, but it's a keep regardless. The opponent opens with Razorverge Thicket and Birds of Paradise. We drew a Spreading Seas, which is decent in this matchup. However, with the Birds of Paradise providing access to any color mana, it's not as effective as it might be in other matchups. So opponent pays 3, plays Courser, and reveals Birds of Paradise on the top of his deck. I untap, and I draw an Island Walk Lord, which is great, or would be great if I had access to 1 more blue mana. So after some consideration, I decide to play Silvergill, revealing my Island Walk Lord to draw into, hopefully, blue mana. Instead, I hit another Harbinger of the Tides. The opponent drew his Birds of Paradise, pays 3 mana now to play the Eternal Witness, showing the versatility of this card, getting back a fetch land from the graveyard to allow him to continue hitting his land drops. Very, very powerful Eternal Witness. And we can see a Restoration Angel on the top of the deck. That's, again, one of the 2 combo pieces. So the opponent is doing quite well at this point. I untap and drew a Dismember, which I'm happy to see since it can interact with his combo. But I'm a little bit stuck on mana, and so was unsure exactly how to go about using it in the best way. Since Spreading Seas allows me access to card draw, and I really want to hit a blue source, I decide to cast Spreading Seas now and take him off of 1 of his red mana. Kiki has 3, I believe it's 3, red mana in his casting cost, and maybe it's even 4, requiring a lot of red. So I decide with Birds of Paradise on the table, he can make any color he wants. With the Wooded Foothills, he can make any color he wants. So I'll just go ahead and hit the mountain right now, taking him off of red mana for the time being. I drew into a Seagate Wreckage. This is an example we can see where Seagate Wreckage would be better as a blue source. So go ahead and play Mutavault, and the opponent is going to draw his Restoration Angel, revealing an Arid Mesa from the top of the deck. Through Courser of Krufik's other ability, which says you may play the top card of your library. If it's a land card, he's able to go ahead and play the Arid Mesa from the top of his library, getting huge card advantage off of both Eternal Witness and Courser of Krufik so far this game. Arid Mesa comes in, he gains 1 life, and he just taps his Razorverge Thicket to commit another Birds of Paradise to the table. We can see he has a Voice of Resurgence, Chord of Calling, and a Restoration Angel all in hand. I draw another Spreading Seas. Not optimal, but it's going to give me access to more card draw. So I do go ahead and play the Spreading Seas on the Razorverge Thicket. It's the only other land right now that's a reasonable target. We do hit a blue source. It's a little bit late. I play the blue source. At this point, I can't play any of my creatures, but I do have Dispel and Dismember handy. The opponent cracks both of his lands, takes 4 damage, because one of them is going to get a shock land, one of them is just going to get a basic. We see Sacred Foundry and Forest for 1, 2, 3, 4. He's got access to 5 mana. He chooses just to play Restoration Angel out. I think about it, and in retrospect, it would have been good just to kill the Restoration Angel right now, or potentially kill whatever target. However, we did see that Kiki was on the top of the deck previously. It just went away because he cracked his fetch lands, so it's not in hand currently. We don't know that he has the Chord of Calling, but we have to assume that Kiki Chord has chord in the name, and they play 4 chords, so we have to assume that if he doesn't have it in hand, it's got to be coming up soon. We're under a lot of pressure, have to deal with this Restoration Angel, but I decide for whatever reason to wait here and not use my Dismember yet. Actually, the opponent is very, let's see, how should I say, very skillful with Kiki Chord. He played very quickly, seemed to know all of his lines, and was moving very quickly. And I think that in the process of him cracking his 2 fetch lands, I missed that he shuffled away the Kiki. Once I saw the Kiki on the top of his deck, my brain sort of just assumed that he had it in hand. So I was going to leave Dismember up in the event that he played the Kiki Jiki next turn, and then respond by dismembering the Kiki Jiki, since with Eternal Witness on the table, Kiki Jiki can provide tons of value every turn by copying Eternal Witness. Even if Restoration Angel isn't on the table for the straight-up combo win, Kiki Jiki without Restoration Angel can still get a lot of value with Eternal Witness. So I was saving the Dismember to kill the Kiki Jiki, but in retrospect, or rather through this replay, I can see that he just shuffled away the Kiki Jiki. So I decide not to kill the Restoration Angel, not to kill the Eternal Witness. The opponent goes ahead and takes one of his fetch lands back to his hand. I untap and let's see. Actually, no, it's not my turn yet. The opponent decides. Oh no, wait, that was the end of my turn. The opponent is attacking here. We don't have good blocks, so I just take 5. And then he goes ahead and plays Voice of Resurgence and Courser of Krufix. Finally puts the Wooded Foothills onto the battlefield and gains 2 life off of 2 Courser of Krufix. And with this mana up, I decide that it's time to use the Dismember. He didn't play Kiki Jiki that turn, so it might be a good time to get rid of this Restoration Angel. I decide at the spur of the moment when he clicks on end step, I make all of these thoughts go through my head really quickly, and I go ahead and use Dismember. In the process of putting it onto the stack, I look at his side of the table, see Voice of Resurgence, and immediately realize that I shouldn't be doing this right now because he's going to get a gigantic elemental token out of it. If this was paper magic, I feel that in the process of moving my hand down towards the table with Dismember, I would have realized and seen the Voice of Resurgence. But since everything happens at the speed of a click, I couldn't really take it back. So as soon as I play it, I say Ack. Hit his Restoration Angel, he gets a big elemental token. So a misstep by me. I was getting pretty flustered by how big his table was getting, how big his board state was, and with limited access to blue mana, my hand is super clunky. He's got pressure for pretty rapid sort of lethal damage, and I can't really afford to leave mana up to counter something like a Chord of Calling. And without his Angel on the table right now, the combo is not even the biggest concern right now. So go ahead and play my Seagate Wreckage. Tap 2 mana to put a Lord on the table. We do have Island Walk, so I decide getting some pressure on the opponent is sort of the best thing to do right now. I leave the Mutavault back as a blocker. Okay, the opponent decides to Chord here. He gets Pia and Kirin, which can close out the game with extra damage from the Thopters. So I activate Mutavault, decide to block the big elemental, since there was no other way I could deal with it yet. So at this point, I have to worry about these Thopters, and they can get. He has open mana to throw them at the Lord if I try to attack with Island Walk. Island Walk would cease to exist. So I think for quite a while. Ultimately, play a Harbinger, bouncing the big elemental. I'm going to have to do some chump blocking next turn. So the opponent bounces the elemental, and I decide not to attack, again, since the Master, Pearl Trident, could have been hit with Thopter damage. He draws a Path to Exile, which is more than he needs. Decides to attack with the 2 Coursers and the 2 Thopters. I decide that I don't really have good blocks, so because if the opponent decided to, I could have blocked one of the Coursers with the Harbinger, since he has 3 toughness and there's only 2 power here. But the opponent could have, before damage, used one of the Thopters to kill Master of the Pearl Trident. Harbinger would have become a 2/2, and he would have died to the block. So the opponent is satisfied just pushing through the damage. I untap, finally draw a blue source, play the blue source, and think about it a little bit. decide that I can try to squeeze Kira onto the table without the opponent thinking about it too much in order to protect my Island Walk Lord from Pia and Kirin's Thopter sacking ability. But the opponent is really savvy. Seeing Kira, he immediately sacrifices a Thopter to destroy my Master of the Pearl Trident, and I decide that that's about all I can take that game. So game 1 was really strong for Merfolk, game 2 was really strong for Kiki Chord. We'll go ahead to game 3 and see how the match resolved. Okay, let's look at the opening hands. 4 lands is a little bit more than we want, but we do have 2 spells that draw cards, Silvergill Adept and Spreading Seas, as well as an Island Walk Lord to work together with the Spreading Seas. Look at the opponent's side of the table. He has 1 land and a Birds of Paradise, and a bunch of good spells, but without access to mana, I have to think that this is a possible mulligan for the opponent. We can see that he brought in Mysium Mortars, a card that doesn't see a ton of play, but if we go ahead and read it, we can see that it's insanely powerful. It's a sorcery, first of all. It costs 1 red and 1 colorless. It deals 4 damage to target creature you don't control. So on its face, that's not extremely powerful. It's just a solid removal spell, a 1-for-1. But a deck that's looking to play Kiki is already trying to establish access to 3 red mana. So playing Mysium Mortars, its overload cost, we can see, requires 3 red mana in addition to 3 generic mana. So this deck will have access to this kind of mana, and the overload cost actually changes the text of target to each. So change its text by replacing all instances of target with each. So it will read, Mysium Mortars deals 4 damage to each creature you don't control. So it's sort of a Anger of the Gods on steroids. So I'm going to keep this hand. Let's go ahead and see if the opponent chose to keep. He did. Seems to me a really risky keep. I go ahead and play my land, and the opponent draws into a land, which was really solid. A very risky keep by an obviously experienced opponent. He takes 3 damage, gets a Temple Garden, and plays a Birds of Paradise. On my turn, I'm going to choose to play the Wanderwine Hub, revealing Silvergill Adept, to untap the Wanderwine Hub and play the Spreading Seas. The Spreading Seas drew us into a Merfolk. The opponent draws yet another land. So the opponent is drawing excellently. I've established Island Walk, but part of the plan with Spreading Seas is to take the opponent off of his colors or his mana, and we can see that that part of the plan is not working at all. The opponent cracks an Arid Mesa, going down to 16, going further down to 14. Let's see what just happened. See, it says he plays Wooded Foothills from the top of his library and puts it from the stack onto the top of his library. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. He did something with the top of his library with the Wooded Foothills. But not a big deal. The opponent taps 3 mana, plays the Courser of Krufix, and then reveals the Wooded Foothills. I think he was just a little out of sequence there. Draw another Spreading Seas, but at this point it's time to start establishing pressure. We play a Merfolk, which will give us access to a lot of tapping and untapping stuff next turn to get a lot of our hand onto the table. This turn, the opponent attacks with the Courser. We take the 2 damage, going down to 18. The opponent uses Mysium Mortars for its regular casting cost to deal with the Regery. Good play again by the opponent. At this point, he puts the Raging Ravine onto the battlefield tapped. Now, without access to Merfolk this turn, our options are a little bit more limited. I play the Mutavault and choose to start the turn with Silvergill Adept, revealing the other Silvergill Adept to draw into more cards and see what our best options are going to be. Having hit a Harbinger of the Tides, we choose to play that and take advantage of the fact that his Courser of Krufix is bounced. This will keep him off of further life gain and just reduce his board presence, taking him off of access to creatures to tap for Chord of Calling. So this turn, the opponent taps his Stomping Grounds and Temple Garden to play Wall of Roots. He can put a counter on Wall of Roots for 1 green mana, tap Raging Ravine and Birds of Paradise to play out his Courser of Kruphix again, revealing a Windswept Heath on the top of the deck, putting it onto the battlefield. Again, we can see excellent sequencing by the opponent. He knew that he was going to play the Courser of Kruphix again, so he wanted to wait to see what the top card of his deck was. I believe he may have already known that it was a land from the previous reveal from Courser of Kruphix, so that he can gain card advantage by getting the land off the top of his deck with Courser of Kruphix's second ability here. You may play the top card of your library if it's a land card. So he replays Courser, gains 1 life from the Windswept Heath, and passes the turn. On our turn, we untap, draw an Ether Vial, which is not amazing. And again, without Regery on the table, we have to be very careful about which 2 spells we choose to play on each turn. So I decide to start with the Silvergill Adept, drawing more cards to give me more options while leaving these 2 mana up. Draw into a Curse Catcher, and go ahead and play an Island Walk Lord. We can see that the opponent has no more access to removal right now, so it's time to start applying pressure, especially with the life gain on the board with Courser of Kruphix. So the creatures get a little bit bigger, and after thinking about my clock and my potential avenues to victory, I decide to just attack with Silvergill Adept to test the waters. I didn't know that the opponent didn't have a Path to Exile or a Lightning Bolt or something like that in his hand. So if I were to have attacked with both of my creatures, the opponent could have Path to Exile my Lord of Atlantis, take me off of Island Walk, and block and kill one of my 2 creatures, and block the other one with Wall of Roots. So I wasn't quite willing to get blown out in that way yet. Reason being that next turn I'll be able to play another Lord of Atlantis, activate Mutavault, and get in for lethal damage even if he's at 13 now instead of 10. If we actually do the calculations, this Lord would make these guys all into 4 power. So by themselves they would be 12. This guy would become 3, so that would be 15. And Mutavault would be a 4 power creature, so that would be 19 damage. So we'll have certainly enough next turn, but again, I chose not to overextend here by attacking with both in the event that the opponent had a Path to Exile and could block and kill just eat my Silvergill Adept. If that was the case, then I could still, if he did have the path, I could still play the Lord out next turn and continue to push a lot of damage, threatening the opponent. So he cracked his fetch land, got a shock land, and gained 1 life, going back up to 13. You can see he has 2 Voice of Resurgence. Razorverge Thicket comes into play tapped from the top of his library. Again, a lot of card advantage this game from Courser of Kruphix. The opponent is tapping, starts tapping 5 lands, potentially playing Kiki Chord, but thinks better of it and passes the turn, leaving up Chord of Calling. Okay, I draw a Master of Waves on my turn, and decide that the best course of action here with this persistent life gain with Courser of Kruphix is just to push the issue and make the opponent have it. So go ahead, tap Cavern of Souls and Wanderwine Hub to play a Lord. The opponent says okay. All the creatures get bigger. And I activate Mutavault as a 4/4 and go to attacks. So the opponent here says, yep, good game. If we think about possible plays he could have had here, Chord of Calling gives him access after tapping 3 green mana, 1, 2, 3. You tap for, let's see, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He could have searched for basically any creature in his deck, but it's possible he doesn't have anything like a Fiend Hunter or a Big Game Hunter, something like that, that could kill one of my creatures. These guys alone are representing 12 plus 3 is 15, so that's lethal. If I remember correctly, Big Game Hunter, if he does have that in his deck, can only hit creatures with power 4 or greater, something like that. So maybe he realizes that if he hits one of the 4 power guys, he's still going to take lethal damage, which is 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 3 for 15. So yeah, Merfolk got there. Was able to squeak out a win against Kiki Chord. Against a deck that has sort of so many toolbox pieces and plays tricky cards like Voice of Resurgence and Restoration Angel at instant speed. It can be a really harrowing deck to play against, really nerve-wracking. But most of the time, the correct decision is going to be to just do what Merfolk does best and attack for lots and lots of damage. All right, so that was that match. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like the videos, comment if you have any thoughts on how the match played out, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks a lot. Bye.